Redwater Gulch burned beneath the late summer sun, the kind of heat that pressed on a man's skull until he swore the desert itself was trying to squeeze him into dust. By noon, every shutter was closed, every door latched, and even the horses stood still in their stalls with their heads low, waiting for the evening breeze that might never come. The town sat silent, holding its breath, because folks in Redwater knew something ugly rode the wind that day. Out past the last line of broken fences, beyond the sagging cottonwoods that died each year a little more, stood the Boone Ranch, lonely, weather-beaten, and stubborn as the woman who kept it alive. Elara Boone moved through the yard with slow purpose, a bucket in each hand, her dark hair tied back, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She was 32, a widow for 3 long, cold years, and though the ranch had chewed up every bit of comfort she had left, she still fought for it. She still whispered to her late husband at dawn, telling him she was trying. She still lit a lamp in the window at night, not knowing if she kept it burning for him, or someone else long buried in her heart. Toby, her aging hound, paced anxiously near the fence, ears pricking at something distant. Elara didn't see it, couldn't see it, not yet. She only felt a strange prickle, like the air itself was warning her. The warning came too late. The first rider crested the rise with a plume of dust behind him. Then 4 more. Then 3 more. By the time Elara set down her buckets, a full dozen of Marlowe's riders were approaching her land, their black coats flapping like vultures' wings. Her breath tightened, not with fear, but with anger worn thin by exhaustion. She wiped her hands on her skirt and stepped toward the porch. The leader, Hawk Marlowe himself, swung off his horse, boots thudding onto the earth with the weight of a man who believed no law could ever touch him. His beard was streaked with gray, his eyes cold and amused. "Elara Boone," he drawled, removing his hat with a mocking dip. "Pretty day for a conversation, ain't it?" She didn't return the smile. "If you've come for water, I've none to spare." Same answer as last month. "Water," Marlowe repeated, laughing. "Oh, we got plenty of water. Enough for our horses, enough for our travels. No, darlin'. We rode up here for something else. Something your late husband left behind." Her jaw tightened. "I told you before, Jacob left me nothing but this ranch. That's all I have, and it's all I aim to keep." Marlowe spread his arms innocently. "See, that's the thing. I ain't convinced. Neither are my boys." He gestured behind him. The riders fanned out, circling her yard like wolves closing in. "Now, rumor says Jacob Boone found something. Something worth killing over. Something he didn't have time to hide proper before that unfortunate fire." Elara swallowed hard, a flicker of dread shooting through her chest. She forced her voice steady. "If you think there's something here, go dig the desert yourself. There's nothing on this ranch but work and bones." Marlowe's smile faded. "I ain't a skin, Widow Boone." Then he nodded once. 2 of his men grabbed her before she could step back. Toby barked, lunging forward, but a boot sent him yelping to the dirt. Elara struggled, twisting, kicking, fighting like a woman who had already lost too much to lose more. But the hands gripping her arms were iron. Marlowe stepped close, so close she could smell whiskey and violence on his breath. "We'll search every inch," he murmured. "And if you're lying, well, then you've earned yourself a lesson." The men dragged her into the open yard, the sun stabbing her eyes. She tried to scream at them, tried to tell them to leave her land, tried to warn them that her husband's secrets weren't the ones they feared. But they didn't care. And the town was too far to hear her anyway. The first lash cracked through the heat like thunder. She gasped, knees buckling, dust rising around her as the whip tore across her back. Again. Again. Marlowe watched, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He wasn't enjoying it, not visibly. It was worse than that. He was waiting, testing, studying her for cracks. By the 7th lash her breath came in broken gulps. By the 10th she could taste blood. By the 12th she wasn't sure she was still in her own body. Her vision blurred, the world tilted. And in that spiraling haze, a name tore itself from her chest before she even knew she was saying it. Calculator. The men paused. Marlowe's eyes snapped toward her. "What did she say?" one rider muttered. Marlowe crouched, gripping her chin. "Who's called her?" "Widow, you'd better answer me." But she could no longer hear him. The sun washed everything white. The dust tasted like copper. The world began to tilt, dissolve, disappear. "Called her," she whispered again, voice fragile as cracking glass. Marlowe's jaw twitched. He knew that name. Every outlaw on the frontier did, though most believed it belonged to a ghost buried years ago. And for the first time that day, something like worry flickered in his eyes. Ilara crumpled as the ground rose to meet her, blood streaking her dress, hair falling across her face. The gang looked around nervously now, scanning the horizon. Marlowe snarled at them. Search the barn, the house, the wells, every damage. I want what Jacob Boone found. An hour later, with nothing discovered and the heat turning vicious, they finally rode off. Dust swallowed them, and silence fell like a curtain. Redwater Gulch saw it all. From the windows, from the saloon porch, from behind half-closed shutters. But no one came. Not one. Even the sheriff, who stood watching from afar with a drink in his hand, turned away before guilt could root too deeply. As the sun dipped low, cool shadows crawled across the Boone ranch, touching the fallen widow first. Toby limped to her side, licking her cheek, whining in circles until he finally lay beside her, guarding her broken form. Night came slowly. Stars pricked the sky. The breeze whispered over the dry scrub. Coyotes called in the far hills. Toby's ears lifted, then stiffened, because far beyond the edge of the desert, a single, distant light moved. A rider. Just a silhouette at first, black against the dying gold of the horizon. Horse tall and dark. Coat snapping in the wind. Hat brim low. No lantern. No hesitation. Coming straight toward the Boone ranch with a purpose that felt carved from stone. Toby stood, tail trembling, not barking, because he knew that shape. He remembered it from another life, another time. His tail swept the ground once, twice. Ilara stirred faintly, as if something inside her recognized the same shadow. And far away, carried on memory rather than wind, came a voice she once swore she'd never forget. If you ever bleed, I'll feel it. If you ever call, I'll ride. The desert, indifferent for so long, held its breath now. Someone was coming. Someone dangerous. Someone the gang should have feared far more than they feared her late husband's secrets. The night swallowed the land. The rider grew closer, and Redwater Gulch was about to learn that some ghosts ride back into the world with gunfire in their wake. The horses sensed him before the wind did. In their stalls, they stirred uneasily, hoof scraping, nostrils flaring as if an old predator had returned to the dark. The Boone ranch was quiet except for Toby's low, trembling whine and the faint whisper of boots over sand. The night seemed to curl inward, gathering itself around the figure who stepped out of the shadowed trail and into the pale wash of moonlight. The rider dismounted without a word. His coat, long and black as canyon midnight, shifted in the breeze like the wing of something ominous. His hat brim hid most of his face, but the horses knew, every trembling muscle in their bodies knew, that this was no ordinary man walking the earth tonight. This was someone the desert had held in its silence, and now released like a long-forgotten spirit whose work was not yet finished. He moved toward the porch with a slow, deliberate stride. Toby barked once, then fell silent, tail tucked yet eyes gleaming with recognition. The rider knelt, rubbed the old hound's ears with a gentleness that felt strangely at odds with the aura of danger rolling off him. Then he saw her. Ilara lay where she had fallen, half on the porch, half in the dust, hair tangled, dress torn, back streaked with blood. The moonlight softened nothing. Every welt, bruise, and cut lay exposed under that pale glow, a map of cruelty etched by men who had mistaken her silence for weakness. The rider's breath broke. "Ilara," he whispered, and for the first time in 5 years, his voice cracked. He lifted her carefully, brushing dust from her cheek with a tenderness a man like him should have forgotten long ago. Pain flickered through him, raw, unfiltered pain, as if seeing her broken brought back every wound, every loss he had buried to survive. He pulled his hat off, and the moon finally revealed his face. Calder Graves, a man Redwater Gulch had once whispered about as if he were a myth. A man believed dead in a train explosion 5 years earlier. A man Ilara had loved before life, fate, and circumstance carved them onto different roads. He held her close, forehead resting against hers, letting the tremor in his breath settle into something colder, darker. The desert wind shifted, sensing the crack in him widening into something the night itself should fear. A memory flooded in, unbidden. They had been young, barely more than kids, riding along the Cimarron River when outlaws ambushed the trail. Calder had thrown himself between her and the gunfire, dragging her behind a fallen log just as the bullets tore through the brush. Water splashed into his face as he shoved her into the river, shouting at her to swim while he turned and fired back with the impossible precision that made men whisper his name like a superstition. She had watched from the water, shivering and terrified, as he stood alone on that bank, outnumbered, outgunned, yet refusing to fall. Afterward, when the gun smoke drifted into the branches, he had pulled her out of the river, wrapped her in his coat, and whispered, "I ain't ever letting you bleed alone. If you ever hurt, I'll feel it. If you ever call, I'll ride." But promises like that don't survive time easily. War had taken him. Marriage had taken her. A train explosion had sealed the rest. Until now. Calder carried her inside, laying her gently on the bed she had once dreamed they'd share. He ran his thumb across her wrist, feeling for a pulse. Weak but present. Her breathing came shallow, but steady enough to anchor him. "You hold on," he murmured. "I'm here now. I'll fix this." The words were not loud, but they were carved with such conviction that the room seemed to stiffen with them. He stepped outside again, the softness vanishing from his eyes the moment he crossed the threshold. The wind picked up, blowing dust across his boots. Above him, clouds began gathering over the ridge, the first warning of a storm that hadn't touched Redwater in months. Calder welcomed it. Kneeling in the dirt where she had fallen, he touched the deep groove of a boot mark. Then another. Then the imprint of a whip's end, half buried in the soil. He traced each line with the precision of a hunter reacquainted with his instincts. He followed the hoof prints across the yard, noting the spacing, the weight, the direction. 11 riders. One horse lame in the front left. Another carrying a heavier man. One using spurs with square rowels. Another dragging a saddlebag too full to bounce freely. It all came back to him, the tracking, the reading, the way the land whispered its secrets if a man knew how to listen. Marlowe's riders, Calder muttered. "You should have stayed in the ground you crawled out of." For the first time in years, his eyes hardened into the look that made soldiers call him the Phantom of Powder Ridge. A look that promised death without hesitation. He saddled his horse, tightened the cinch, and was about to mount when a lantern flickered near the fence. Sheriff Harlan Tate approached slowly, boots sinking into the soft dirt, shoulders tense. The sheriff's face was lined, weather-beaten, a man who carried more fear than authority these days. He lifted the lantern, its light catching on Calder's face. "Well, I'll be damned," Tate whispered. "I heard rumors, but I didn't believe him. Thought you were dead." "Almost was," Calder answered without turning fully. "But I got unfinished business." Tate swallowed hard. "If you go after Marlowe's men, you'll stir a hornet's nest none of us can contain. That gang runs half his territory. They'll burn the whole town to ash if they think you're hunting him." Calder finally faced him, eyes like cold steel. They laid hands on her. "That ain't reason to." "It's reason enough." Tate shifted, lantern trembling slightly. "Calder, I'm a skin you to think this through. Ilera wouldn't want you dying for her." Calder stepped closer, the shadows swallowing half his face. "Those men hurt her. They left her to bleed in the dirt like she was nothing. If you think I'm letting that stand, you don't remember who I am." The sheriff deflated. He did remember. Everyone did. But he tried one last time. "If you go down this road," Tate warned, "there ain't no coming back." Calder placed his boot in the stirrup. "I came back the moment they touched her." Lightning cracked across the sky in a thin white line. The wind tore through the trees with a low moan, carrying the scent of the coming storm. Tate stepped back as Calder mounted, his silhouette larger, darker, more myth than men. "You can face them alone," the sheriff shouted over the raising wind. Calder leaned forward, guiding the reins with a slow, deadly calm. "I ain't alone," he said quietly. "The desert rides with me tonight." He galloped off before Tate could say another word, the horse's hooves thundering across the earth, leaving only a spiral of dust in his wake. Behind him, the Boone Ranch glowed faintly with lamplight, the only fragile warmth in a territory about to drown in vengeance. Inside, Ilera stirred again, whispering his name in her fevered dreams as if she felt him tearing across the plains. The clouds rolled in fast, devouring the stars, covering the moon in a shroud of bruised dark gray. The air tasted electric, sharp, restless. Toby scratched at the door, whining at the storm gathering both above and within the men who had returned from the dead. Calder followed the tracks into the open desert, each marked deep and clear beneath the moonless sky. His coat snapped behind him, rain beginning to spit across his shoulders. Thunder rumbled somewhere distant, echoing off the canyon walls. Every step forward carved the old Calder further from the man he once tried to be. The Mun who left his guns holstered. The Mun who wanted peace more than blood. The Mun who believed he could bury his past and live like an ordinary soul. But the past had found him, beaten her, bled her, left her alone. And so Calder Graves, dead to the world but alive to vengeance, rode into the darkness, a storm at his back and a fire in his chest, hunting the men who had forgotten what happened when you provoked a ghost. Calder rode into the canyons like a man slipping into an old skin, one he had once shed in hopes of becoming something gentler. The moon hung low above the jagged cliffs, its pale light carving sharp edges along the stone as if the land itself had been cut by a giant's blade. The wind howled through the ravines, carrying the faint echo of hoofbeats, 11 distinct rhythms, scattered, panicked, fleeing into the maze of red rock. He followed them with the precision of a predator reclaiming familiarity. The desert had been his teacher once, long before the world believed him dead. It had shaped him, stripped him, rebuilt him into something men whispered about in saloons and campsites. Tonight, those whispers guided him. He found the first outlaw near Horseshoe Ravine, crouched beside a dying fire, muttering curses as he wrapped a torn boot. Calder watched from the shadows, silent as the creeping cold. When the outlaw finally sensed him, it was already too late. Calder stepped into the flickering light, the brim of his hat hiding everything except the unyielding steel of his gaze. "You, no," the outlaw stammered, stumbling backward until his spine hit rock. "It can't be. You're dead." "The train," everyone said. Calder raised a finger to his lips, not for silence, but as a promise. "You'll answer one thing," he murmured. "Where's Marlowe headed?" The outlaw shook violently. "Silver Vein Mine. The old trail through Devil's Gap." "Good." Calder holstered his gun. "Now ride home. Pray you forget this night." But fear had its own voice. The outlaw lunged for his pistol. Calder didn't even step back. He simply moved his hand, smooth as wind over water. The shot cracked once, echoing through the canyon, and the outlaw fell still, eyes wide open as if seeing death wearing a face he once heard of only in campfire tales. Calder walked away, footsteps swallowed by sand. The canyons twisted ahead like a labyrinth carved for spirits, not men. He followed the trail deeper, the cliffs rising around him, narrowing like jaws closing. Shadows stretched long across the path. The air grew colder, sharper. Somewhere above, a hawk cried, warning or witness. He didn't know. He found the second rider at an abandoned mining shack clinging to a cliffside. Lantern light glowed from cracks between the warp boards. Calder approached slowly, careful not to disturb the brittle stones. Inside, the outlaw paced like a trapped animal, muttering about ghosts, curses, and a men that shouldn't walk the earth. Calder's voice drifted through the open doorway. "You scared of spirits." The lantern fell with a crash. The outlaw shot blindly, bullets slamming into empty boards. Calder stepped in behind him, disarming him with a twist of the wrist that sent the pistol clattering across the floorboards. The outlaw whimpered, clutching his broken hand. "Tell me," Calder said, "what did Marlowe think he'd find on her land?" The outlaw squeezed his eyes shut. "Water. A deep spring. The only one for miles. Jacob found it, and Marlowe made sure he never used it." Calder absorbed the words, rage simmering beneath his skin. But he didn't show it. He never did. Rage made hands shake. His hands needed to stay still. He left the outlaw alive, unconscious on the shack's floor, because some men deserved the chance to remember fear. Farther into the canyon, thunder began to roll, low and distant, crawling across the sky like a waking beast. The approaching storm felt tethered to Calder himself, pulled by the violence gathering inside him. Lightning lit the canyon walls in ghostly flashes, illuminating shapes that darted, hid, watched from the dark. Word spread faster than the wind. Calder Graves was alive. The phantom of Powder Ridge had returned. The third confrontation came near the collapsed tunnels of the old Silver Vein Mine. Two outlaws huddled near a cluster of boulders, rifles ready, eyes darting like they expected demons to descend from the cliffs. They didn't see Calder until he was already among them, a shadow ripping through their camp with unthinkable speed. One swung his rifle, but Calder slammed him against a boulder, disarming him with ease. The other fired and missed by inches, the bullet ricocheting off stone as Calder pivoted, grabbed the man by his coat, and dragged him to the ground. "You can shoot at me all night," Calder said softly, gripping the man's collar. "But you won't hit what you don't understand. Why you should be dead." The men choked. They all swore you died on that train. Calder's eyes narrowed. I tried. He knocked the man out and stood still for a moment, letting the wind cool the heat rising in his chest. The storm crept closer, the smell of rain pushing through the dry air. In another part of the world, back at the Boone Ranch, Alara stirred awake. Pain lanced her back, her ribs, her arms. She gasped and clung to the blanket beneath her, unable to tell if the pounding in her head came from fever or memory. Toby whimpered beside her bed, nudging her hand, begging her to stay conscious. Her eyes fluttered open, taking in the room dimly lit by a single lantern. Calder's coat rested on the chair. His gloves lay folded on the table. A basin of water sat nearby, stained pink. Her breath shuddered as realization washed through her. He came back. Tears welled unexpectedly, though she tried to brush them away. She didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Calder returning meant danger. Calder returning meant he would spill blood for her. Calder returning meant the love she had buried under years of grief had never truly died. She whispered his name, but only the storm answered. Back in the canyon, the fourth outlaw didn't get the chance to shoot or speak. He tried to ambush Calder near the narrowest ravine, hiding behind a fallen log with his rifle ready, but Calder had already seen the faint glow of tobacco from the man's cigarette. A single shot from Calder's revolver extinguished both the ember and the man's life. The canyon swallowed the echo like it had been hungry for it. Farther ahead, near the mouth of Devil's Gap, two riders waited nervously, their horses pawing the ground, as if aware that running would not save them. One whispered, "He can't be alive. Nobody survives a train exploding under him." The other spat into the dirt. "I don't care what ghost stories you heard. If he's out here, I'll kill him myself." Calder stepped out from behind them before either could react. "You won't." Both men spun, rifles rising. Calder shot the first squarely in the hand, forcing him to drop the weapon with a scream. The second fired, but Calder ducked, rolled, and fired upward, the bullet grazing the man's shoulder and spinning him sideways. He approached slowly, boots crunching on gravel. "I ain't here to kill every one of you," he said. "Just the ones too stupid to walk away." But neither man walked away. Fear and pride chained them to their fate. Calder ended it quickly. By dawn, the storm finally broke. Rain poured over the canyon in roaring sheets, turning dust into mud and drowning the last traces of the night's violence. Calder stood under the downpour, letting the water slide down his face, cooling the fire in his blood, but not extinguishing it. Marlowe's camp lay ahead, a fortress of rock shelters, wagons, guns, and desperate men. Lanterns glowed like angry embers under the heavy rain. Marlowe himself stood at the center, shouting orders, face twisted with fury. "Spread out," he roared. "If Graves is alive, he's coming for us. Arm every man. Light the torches. We end him before he reaches this camp." But his voice trembled. He remembered the tales. He remembered the reputation. And he remembered the train. Lightning cracked above them, lighting up the canyon like daylight. Far on the ridge, Calder appeared, a silhouette in the storm, drenched, unbroken, eyes burning through the night. The men closest to Marlowe went pale. "It really is him," someone whispered. "A ghost. A devil." "No," another said. "Something worse." Dawn bled slowly across Redwater Gulch, staining the sky in streaks of red and gold, as if the desert itself sensed what was coming. The town was silent, too silent. Doors closed. Curtains pinned shut. Not a single horse tied outside the saloon. Every soul in Redwater had retreated indoors, waiting for the storm they felt trembling in the earth. Calder rode down Main Street like a ghost sliding through the morning haze. Rainwater from the night storm still clung to his coat, and the mud beneath his horse's hooves carried the tracks of men who had fled here before him. His shadow stretched long behind him, and with every echoing step, the air thickened, anticipation wrapped in fear. Ahead, Marlowe's riders lined the street, rifles raised, eyes wide with the kind of dread men feel when the legends they mock step into the light. At their center, Hawk Marlowe stood tall, hands resting on the twin pistols at his hips. His face was carved with defiance, but the tremor in his jaw betrayed his unease. Calder stopped 10 paces away. "Marlowe," he called, voice calm as desert stone. "This ends now." The gang tightened their circle. The sheriff, peering through the saloon window, whispered a shaky prayer. Women held their children inside their homes, ears pressed to timber walls, waiting for the hell about to break loose. Marlowe smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Graves. I'll be damned. You're harder to kill than a rattler in a well. You tried once, Calder said. Didn't take. That train blast should have sent you to the canyon floor, Marlowe spat. It didn't. And now you laid hands on her. Every rider in Marlowe's crew flinched at the shift in Calder's tone. The words were quiet, almost gentle, but they shook like thunder trapped in a whisper. Marlowe lifted his chin. Big talk from a dead man. How about you join your grave proper this time? Calder's hand hovered near his pistol. My grave can wait, he said. Yours can't. The street held its breath. A gunshot cracked first. No one knew who fired it, but the moment it split the air, chaos erupted. Calder dove sideways, rolling behind a water trough as bullets tore splinters from the saloon wall. His revolver barked once, twice, dropping 2 riders who had rushed forward too bold, too sure of their numbers. The gang scattered, taking cover behind barrels, hitching posts, and the blacksmith's wagon. Gunfire rained across the street, shattering windows and sending dust clouds curling like smoke around Calder's boots. He moved with surgical precision, each step calculated, each shot deliberate. His mind slipped into the quiet cold of his old life, the place where sharpshooters felt no fear, only mathematics, distance, angle, timing, breath. One man tried to flank him from the barber's porch. Calder pivoted, firing before the outlaw even raised his rifle. Another rushed from a corral, shotgun blazing. Calder dropped to a knee, fired through the rising dust, and the men fell without ever touching the trigger again. Marlowe shouted orders, voice cracking. Spread out. Don't let him pin you. A bullet grazed Calder's arm, tearing fabric and skin. He didn't flinch. He fired back, the outlaw's weapon clattering onto the dirt as he collapsed. 2 riders charged on horseback, hoping speed would do what bullets hadn't. Calder stood still this time, letting them close the distance. At the perfect second, he stepped aside, shot the first horse's saddle strap, sending its rider flying, then swung his revolver up and fired point-blank at the second outlaw. The street went still again, only smoke and dust drifting like ghosts. Marlowe stood nearly alone now, breath ragged, eyes wide as he realized his numbers meant nothing against the men he had resurrected with cruelty. You should have stayed dead, Marlowe growled, backing toward the sheriff's office. I tried, Calder replied. But she called me back. Her? Marlowe sneered. That stubborn widow ain't worth. Choose the next words real careful, Calder warned, stepping forward. Marlowe's hand twitched near his pistol. You don't know what she's hiding beneath that land. Then tell me, Calder said, voice steady, before your lies bury you. Marlowe laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. Jacob Boone didn't die in no accident. I killed him. Pushed him into that stable fire myself. The world stilled. Even the wind froze. You murdered him, Calder repeated softly. He found something, Marlowe said, eyes blazing. A spring. Deep underground. Enough water to buy out half the county. I wanted it. He wouldn't give it. So I took care of him. And I'd done the same to her if she'd just stayed quiet. Calder's jaw tightened. And the whipping. A reminder, Marlowe said. A woman alone don't own anything out here. Not water. Not land. Not life. You're wrong, a voice rasped behind them. Illara stood at the edge of the street, leaning heavily on a porch post, wrapped in Calder's coat, bruised but unbroken. Toby pressed against her leg, teeth bared. Marlowe paled. You should have stayed in your bed. I've stayed in enough places while men like you ruined what they pleased, Illara said, stepping forward with more strength than her body should have allowed. Not today. Calder spun instantly toward her. You shouldn't be out here. I won't hide, she answered, meeting his eyes with a fire he hadn't seen in years. Not while this man still breathes. Marlowe drew his pistol in a sudden last burst of desperation. Calder moved first. He strode between them, gun raised, gaze locked on Marlowe with the cold precision of a man who no longer doubted what he had to do. Ilara's voice cracked through the silence. Do it. Calder pulled the trigger. Marlowe staggered, shock twisting his features before he fell to the dust, the final villain in a story that had dragged on far too long. The street went motionless. Smoke drifted lazily from Calder's barrel. The townsfolk began emerging from their doorways, faces ashen, eyes wide not with fear, but with a bone-deep understanding that they had witnessed something that would be told around firesides for generations. Calder holstered his gun and turned to Illara. She swayed, exhaustion catching up to her, and he reached her before she could fall. She looked at him with a painful softness. "You came back." "I told you I would," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. A tear slipped down her face, catching the morning light. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "Not then, not now." Calder's hand trembled as he cupped her face. "Then let me stay. Let me rebuild what they tried to burn. Let me be the man I should have been." Ilara rested her forehead against his chest, breathing him in, grounding herself in the presence she once believed she'd lost forever. Toby circled them, tail wagging weakly, as if blessing the moment. The townspeople watched in silence, not out of gossip, but reverence. Redwater Gulch wasn't a place for miracles. Yet here stood one born from blood, dust, love, and return. And so it was said, long after the smoke cleared and the dust settled, that the rider who walked out of Death's shadow brought more than gunfire back to Redwater. He brought justice where there had been none, hope where there had been silence, and love where there had once been loss. They say the frontier remembers everything, blood, bullets, storms, and ghosts, but it remembers love most of all. And somewhere in the whispering wind of Redwater Gulch, the legend lived on, of the rider who returned with gunfire, and the woman whose call brought him home.